YouTube. Okay, I think we're live. So let's just go ahead and start talking. Welcome everyone to our Truth Seekers meeting. We are the disciples of Yahweh and Jesus Christ. I'm Scott, together with my brother Jody, and we thank you for watching, attending, and we have a special show tonight. For the first time, we have an opposing view, so to speak. We have Michael Ruse. He'll explain his position. I don't want to pigeonhole him, and we'll let him define his outlook. But we do ask for your support in prayers and subscriptions, views, likes, and shares. And now to introduce our two guests, here's Brother Jody.
Wow, we got the a great legend, Paul Copan, but on the other side, we do have Michael Ruse. He's both of them are great scholars in their field. Now, I'm sure I would side with Paul more than I would Michael. I'm sure I'd side with Michael on some issues. But, I love the friendliness. I was kind of hesitant to even email Michael Ruse to this program. And I told him I had Paul Copan on board, and it's like, oh, sure, I'll do it if he's on board. And I was like, wow, that was easy. But I love the fact he's a nice, friendly, either agnostic or atheist. And to me, he's just showing the morality of what was given to him. But I'm sure he'll say something different. But that's okay. We like to have opposing views sometimes. And they both wrote several books. Paul Copan wrote one of the greatest books ever wrote, as far as Is God a Moral Monster? And that's, I think that answers probably some of the questions Michael Ruse has had, but probably wouldn't agree. And then Michael Ruse is also, he's wrote several different books on atheism. And I urge you to check him out. He was actually the first atheist book that I ever bought. So, bought brand new. I've got several atheist books. And, sometimes you wished atheist was like Richard Dawkins. Seems like not a friendly person. But Michael Ruse is definitely a friendly person. But let me introduce you, and I'll give you maybe, this is, can science and God agree, or that's the subject matter. Does the Bible and science, or does God and science have to conflict? This is like a discussion. This is not a debate. This is just between friends. We love each other, we respect each other, and at the end of the day, we go out and eat together. But let me introduce you, Brother Paul Copan and Michael Ruse. Go ahead, guys.
Well, Jody,
welcome.
I don't trust you. You're saying what a nice guy I am and how friendly. I seem to remember the serpent in the Garden of Eden was an awfully nice chap. Really friendly. Hi there, Eve. Boy, you've got a great ass. My goodness me, I haven't seen anything like this. By the way, are you fond of fruit? You're doing exactly the same thing with me,
Yeah,
Hey,
be careful.
you're making me look like the serpent anyway.
Well,
I don't know. You don't exactly remind me of Eve, although it may be that you do like apples.
Okay. Oh, I don't believe you're, I don't believe you're of the devil. I don't believe, I believe you're a really nice guy. You gave us some good comedy, so I appreciate that.
So Paul or Michael, can you tell us how you guys got together on that book, the recent book that you did about God and science? How that happened?
I think.
Uh-oh.
Frozen there.
Yeah, it's up to you, Paul.
Okay, maybe I'll just jump in. The connection came through the initiative of Chris Reese, who co-edited with me and a couple of others the Dictionary of Christianity and Science. And so we teamed up on another kind of a follow-up volume in which we wanted to do a 3 views book with Zondervan, same publisher, on Christianity and Science. So we had a 3 views book proposal accepted, and so we had enlisted Michael Ruse, who readily got on board, and we also had the theologian Alistair McGrath of Oxford University join us to give another viewpoint, and then finally Bruce Gordon of Houston Baptist University, who presented his viewpoint. So he takes more of a Discovery Institute perspective, intelligent design, where there's a much tighter integration between the scripture and science, or Christianity and science. So that's a more tightly integrated view, as opposed to, or as distinct from Alistair McGrath, who took a more dialogical viewpoint, that these are in, that the faith and science are in conversation with one another, that they aren't in an inherent conflict. There are issues to be worked out. It's an ongoing dialogue, but they're certainly not antagonistic toward each other. Michael Ruse takes a view that they are not really speaking the same language, that what Scripture says, the stories that it tells, the moral truths that it presents, these are not in conflict with science, but it's just that the Scriptures and science are speaking very different languages. They have, the ancient Near Eastern culture of the Old Testament was far, it had another agenda than to talk about the realities of science, as we may do in our own modern times. So as an agnostic, he takes a viewpoint where they're speaking in 2 different realms. They don't have anything to do with each other per se, although both, someone can learn from both areas. They're kind of non-overlapping domains. And then finally, there's a 4th view, wasn't included in the book because it would have been, I don't think it would have been much of a conversation to have with someone like a Richard Dawkins, who takes a 4th view in which he sees them inherently conflicting with each other. So it's called the conflict or warfare view of science. So in this viewpoint, basically there's no real conversation there. Faith and science are at war with each other, and obviously, coming from a viewpoint like Richard Dawkins, faith is just the realm of mythology, doesn't correspond to reality, which he takes to be purely physical, and so on. So those are the 4 traditional views held in terms of the relationship of faith and science, and so we just have 3 of those views represented, and Michael Ruse is one of those representatives, where there's a much, let's say, friendlier dialogue, less, I think, antagonism or hostility. But like I said, Michael Ruse just holds that that they're speaking 2 different languages.
Unfortunately, we've lost Michael. He seems to have dropped off, but as soon as he comes back, we'll get him out here to tell us more about that. I want to put the picture of the book up on the screen here. Oh boy. I think, no, that's, I'm trying to find the window. There it is. Okay, so now you should be seeing 3 views on Christianity and science. This is edited by Paul and written by Michael. Has a chapter, a section there. And so Paul, as the editor, did you get to share your opinion or weigh in any way in the book?
Well, trying to be an even-handed editor in this process meant that I simply summarized the different viewpoints, pointed out various areas of tension, areas where perhaps things could be tightened up for various contributors, But I didn't weigh in on my own perspective. And likewise, the other, the co-editor, Chris Reese, he wrote the introduction, whereas I wrote the conclusion and summarized things. But Chris basically laid out the parameters, talked about the different positions that are held. And again, the four positions I laid out of the warfare view, the dialogical view, the non-overlapping view, and then the more integrated or more tightly integrated for Bruce Gordon. So those viewpoints were the ones that he just laid out and presented, and basically gave a little bit of a teaser on what to anticipate from the various contributors. So yeah, I didn't weigh in on my own perspective, although obviously I'm coming from a Christian point of view, and I'm more sympathetic to Bruce Gordon and to Alistair McGrath than I would be to Michael Ruse, although, as you've noted, he's an amiable chap.
Yes, sir. So this the view that Michael Ruse holds is this non-overlapping magisteria idea, right? That Christianity and science have they are in separate realms. Are there any Christians that you know of who do hold such a view?
I think there are some folks who would take that viewpoint that that the Christian faith is simply speaking a different language, and that we have to be, and I think there's a point to it that we have to be very careful about overreaching on trying to make the Bible or the Old Testament or Genesis 1 and 2 into a scientific treatise. It wasn't intended to be that. What we see in Genesis 1 and 2 is more like a theological and literary layout of God's creation of the world. And it's not trying to make scientific fact. It's speaking to an ancient Near Eastern people.
There we go. You got me now.
All right, welcome back.
Okay.
So anyway.
You knew how much we pay for this. But go on.
So I mean, there are people who do take that viewpoint where there's no real purpose in trying to bring those together. They're just speaking different languages. But it hasn't been the traditional view.
Yeah, Michael, we were just talking about the book that the two of you worked on, Christianity and Science, and I was asking Paul about that. What would you like to say about your contribution to that book? And could you just describe your position briefly? And by the way, we can't see you right now.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go. Hold on. Now you hold on. Now you can. Okay.
Ah, much better.
And this is another of the dogs we have. Okay. I think I should, I'm an evolutionist, so I think to understand the present, you've got to understand the past. And I was raised as a Quaker in the years after the Second World War. Very, very, if I say very intensely, I don't mean, that wasn't in any sense oppressive or anything like that, because Quakers don't go in for that sort of thing. But it was always, it filled me with a strong feeling that there are some questions which are more important than others. And I guess the two are the Kantian question. What do I know, or what can I know? What should I do? And I mean, this was what I grew up with. So when I discovered philosophy, basically, although about the age of 20, my belief in the existence of God just faded. It wasn't, a Paul to Damascus experience in reverse. I didn't wake up one morning and say, oh my goodness me, God does not exist. Hallelujah. It just went. But the questions stayed with me. I mean, they've stayed with me all of my life. I honestly thought at 20, by the age of 70, I'd be getting back on side with God. I mean, you can't afford to make mistakes. You get to meet St. Peter, which I'm going to do very shortly. And, it's not good enough to say, sorry, St. Peter, I just didn't believe. He's going to say, ha ha, I don't believe either. Down you go. But actually, I'm not sure that St. Peter would. St. Peter always he was a family man. He always struck me as a pretty decent human being. But anyhow, But so, as I say, these are questions which have always been with me. I grew up with Christians. I mean, my best friend was a Roman Catholic. And so I never had any side to me about mixing with Christians or talking to them. I mean, I never, like, say, Richard Dawkins had that kind of, he obviously did have a road to Damascus experience in reverse, where suddenly the whole thing became totally repellent to him. No, in fact, in 1981, I was invited to join a group of liberal Christians and Unitarians, the Institute on Religion in the Age of Science, and they have an annual meeting off New Hampshire, the Isles of Stars, Star Island. And I've been going for 40 years. I mean, I was there last month, and I cannot tell you how comfortable I feel with these people. I mean, they know I'm not a believer. They know when they go up to, candlelight service, I'm standing there grinning, and they know I'll be there when they get back. But I've always been incredibly comfortable with, I wouldn't say obviously with every kind of Christian, but by and large, we're all in this together, and they care about the kind of things I care about. So there you go.
I'll tell you this much about myself quickly, Michael. I was an agnostic, basically. I was pretty much apathetic about the whole question of worldview, but I didn't have any hostility toward religious people. I never thought that they were stupid or delusional or anything like that. So I've been on the other side of my own camp. So I understand. I was not raised in a Christian home. My father was basically as well an agnostic and apathetic to all religion. And my mother was into the New Age religion, all kinds of weird and wacky things. Yes.
Well, I will
familiar.
tell you one thing, and then I'll shut up and let Paul talk again. Although neither of my wives nor I were religious, and both of my wives were total. I mean, my second wife, she honestly does not know the relationship between Abraham and Isaac. As far as she's concerned, they could be gay partners. I mean, they really could. But we've always, both of my wives, we've always felt that some things are sacred, and that is letting young people ask any questions that they want. And we've always tried to have an evening supper. Doesn't always work, but where any question could go on the table. I can still remember as a kid being told, no, we don't talk about that sort of thing. In my family, sometimes it was very embarrassing, but we did talk. And I have to say, and I'll shut up, but I'm very proud. My oldest son is a nurse. My second child is a girl, is a high school teacher. My third child, a daughter, is a public defender in Jacksonville. My fourth child is an emergency medic in Vancouver. And my fifth child is making over $200,000 in his first year as a lawyer in Washington. So, everybody, 4 out of 5 isn't bad.
Well, we really appreciate having a cordial and friendly atheist, or however you want to, agnostic, however you want to characterize yourself. Again, I don't want to pigeonhole you, but I did want to ask you about the book.
Oh, yes, you do, Scott. Oh, yes, you do. But it's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
I still love you all the same.
I do want to ask you about the book, Christianity and Science. Paul was explaining while we were waiting for you to come back about the different views that are represented in the book. And he mentioned the view that you argue for, which it sounds to me somewhat like the non-overlapping magisteria of Stephen Jay Gould. I wanted to ask you to please explain that view and your take on it, if it's similar to Gould or different. How do you present it?
Well, at one level, I think it is non-overlapping magisteria, if you like. I do think at a certain level, science and religion are asking about different questions. I mean, for instance, I don't think science is asking about the meaning of life and that sort of thing. I mean, who is it? Weinberg, Steve Weinberg just died. And he was famous for saying, the more I study the universe, the less it seems to have purpose. And what I want to say is, why are you surprised? You go into an enterprise which doesn't have any purpose. Why are you surprised at the end that you don't find any. I mean, you define the whole enterprise as not having purpose. So don't whine when you can't get it. So I'm quite happy to say science and religion are trying to do different things. Having said that, somehow it seems to me kind of almost dishonest just to leave the discussion at that point, because clearly we've got concerns and there are going to be overlapping things at certain levels. For instance, you cannot be a Darwinian evolutionist and be a young earth creationist. I mean, you just can't. So, I mean, obviously there are going to be areas of overlap. My question is, are these areas of overlap such that they destroy what I call the essence of Christianity? Now, remember, I grew up as a Quaker, so Quakers are not big on the Bible. I mean, you know, it's that of God in every person, the inner light that counts. I mean, Quakers take, you know, Matthew 5 through 7 very seriously. But, you know, the idea that that Noah actually was on an ark is, you know, to a Quaker it's just totally alien to us. So at that level, but I still think that there are issues which are important. Like, for instance, does science support the view that in some sense humans are special? Because clearly Christianity is totally and utterly predicated on the view that humans are special. We're made in the image of God. I mean, we're made in the image of God. Now, it doesn't mean that, I mean, God knows when any sparrow falls. I mean, I've read Matthew, but then it immediately says, if God cares about them, does he not care far more about you? So I think there are issues which need to be tackled there. Now, to say, oh, well, that means they're going to clash, I don't think that follows at all. But I do think you take Noah's flood, for example. I want to say Noah's flood cannot be literally true. But am I just to end at that point? No. For me, the most important thing about Noah's flood is the bit that you were never allowed to learn about at school. They have this flood. God wipes them all out except Noah and family. And what happens when they get back to land? Noah gets absolutely stinking drunk and his kid comes in and laughs at him. Now, what does that mean? It means that, you know, doing all this did not eliminate sin. It didn't. So the way I look at Noah's flood is, oh my God, simplistic solutions don't work. I mean, if only George W. Bush and Tony Blair had realized this when they were marching into Iraq. They don't care. They don't work. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not being anti-war or anything like that. I'm just saying simplistic solution. And I cannot think of a better example to show this than Noah's flood. So, as I say, I don't see, okay, they're different magisteria, nothing to say to each other. No, let's just get on. Oh, no. We have a hell of a lot to say to each other. And that's what makes life so exciting. That's why we are made in the image of God.
All right. Paul, I'd like to get your response. And maybe since you don't get to do this as an editor in the book, you could tell us some of what your thoughts are on the matter.
Right. The position that I take, I would say that Michael is right, that there isn't an inherent conflict between God and, say, evolution, Darwinistic evolution. Although one could say that it is God utilizes the evolutionary process to bring about his purposes. So it's not as though these are that God has to work through direct means rather than indirect or secondary means. So I don't see those inherently in conflict. I do think that there are biblical texts that could indeed support that. For example, in Genesis chapter 1, people say, look, or Genesis 2, look, God made Adam from the dust of the ground. Well, in the book of Job chapter 10, he's saying, will you who made me from the clay return me to the dust again? Now, in the book of Job describes his life. Some people will take Job as being a fictitious character, others as historical, but that's beside the point. But even in the book of Job, Job describes he kind of curses the day that he was born and the day that of his conception and so forth. So clearly, the assumption is that that Job came into existence through the ordinary reproductive means that we're all familiar with, and in the same way as the psalmist in Psalm 139 says, "You knit me together in my mother's womb. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made." Well, it wasn't as though this was an instance of direct creation, that the psalmist somehow was directly created by God. No, again, it was utilizing these processes that were put into place by God, but again, it was through a longer indirect route rather than something that was directly created. So I don't see that there is some sort of inherent conflict that is here. When it comes to the broader parameters of, say, how the universe came to existence, I would say that or even the question, I know, Michael, you've talked about this before. You've talked about, the astonishing question. Of course, Wittgenstein was one who was blown away by it. But why is there anything at all? And you said you're not just talking about how things came to existence, but why does anything exist at all? Why is there something rather than nothing at all? And I think that there are some excellent responses that a biblical faith has to offer in response to these fundamental questions. And I think ultimately one cannot escape the fact that something has always been there. Unless you believe that something can pop into existence uncaused out of nothing, like the universe, then you've got to believe that something has always been in existence, and that certainly fits nicely with the biblical framework that God has always existed and brought the universe into existence a finite time ago. And we can go on from there. I know Michael, he takes a more subjectivistic viewpoint when it comes to morality. I do think that morality is a good argument, objective moral values, human duties, and so forth, that these are indicators of a moral realm that is distinct from the merely natural world with its processes and so forth. And so that's why we cheer on moral reformers. We say apartheid, abolishing apartheid or slavery, or the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. These were moral achievements, but it wasn't because morality was somehow invented, that this is a construction, some sort of a groundbreaking construction of morality. But no, we see it as corresponding to a moral realm that exists independent of us, independent of our flaws and foibles and wickedness and so forth. So I think that these and other reasons could be adduced to point us in the direction of a framework, at least, that is theistic, that helps us to make sense of the universe's existence, why something exists rather than nothing at all. And and we could talk about other things like moral duties and so forth. But anyway, I would say that this is a kind of a general position that I take that would certainly be in agreement with someone like Alistair McGrath and Bruce Gordon, and Michael takes a different view on the matter.
All right, well, go ahead, Michael.
Okay, I want to jump right in here.
Yes.
You see, okay, what is my position about, as what Heidegger called the fundamental question of metaphysics? Why is there something rather than nothing? Now, let me say right off, I think this is a meaningful question. I don't agree with Wittgenstein, nor do I agree with a lot of scientists like, Steve Weinberg, who say, the Big Bang and everything, that answers it all. I think, why is there something rather than nothing, is a tremendously profound question. Now, I don't have an answer to that. I don't know. I don't think I'm being stupid about this, because I think there are a lot of things that we encounter in this life where we just don't have answers. Starting with the body-mind question. Why on earth can a pile of molecules think? And, you talk about emergence and that sort of thing. That's like that cartoon. And then a miracle happens. It's not an answer. Then a miracle happens. I mean, also, quantum entanglement. How can a molecule doing something at this end of the universe affect a molecule doing the same, the converse thing at the other end. Boy, if that isn't mind-blowing, I don't know. So I'm with JBS Haldane. I think the world is not only queerer than we think it is, it's queerer than we could think it is. So for me, being that kind of agnostic in the sense of I don't know is at a certain level is a very spiritual sort of experience. And I mean, I don't want to get credit for being spiritual or anything like that. But again, the funny thing is this reflects back on my Quaker background, because Quakers are hugely into mysticism. And of course, mysticism is very much the idea that at some level, there's a realm beyond rationality. Mystics say they can get at it. I don't know if they can or not, but I'm absolutely convinced that there's more, to this than, Horatio, the more, that meets our eye. So I don't look upon being an agnostic. I mean, I'm not an atheist. I mean, I don't have the confidence of Richard Dawkins, but I don't look upon being an atheist as, in some sense, being either inferior to being a believer or to being a non-believer. I think my position is one of really inquiry. When I die, I'd like to meet St. Peter, but I don't think it's going to happen. I'm not sure I want to reach. My idea of hell would be to stuck in a room with Richard Dawkins for all eternity. but I don't know. I mean, is there some kind of world force? Am I going to be reconstituted on Andromeda or something? I don't know. I mean, at one level, I do want to go on existing. I love doing philosophy. I love my students. I love my wife. I mean, I'd want to go on doing it. But at another level, it won't break my heart to see you people fail to get on top of global warming. So, but seriously, I don't know. So I'm going into the unknown with, as I say, I hope not in a gloomy sense, almost in an exciting sense. But I'm trying not to kid myself that there is going to be something, just as I'm trying not to be cocky and say there's going to be nothing. The world is queerer than I think it is. The world is queerer than I could think it is.
I don't want to stop you guys at any point from talking to each other. We're just having a conversation. I'm not trying to be a mediator, but I just want to keep the conversation rolling along. Michael, one thing you said caught my ear when you talked about, where does it all come from? And your answer basically is, I don't know. It seems to me if we don't know the ultimate origin of things, we don't know what they're truly constituted of. It's hard to come up with anything like meaning, purpose, morality. How do you ground those things from a position of I don't know?
Well, I think it's really my position is very orthodox in a sense. I'm a good Roman Catholic on this one. I think that what is good is what is natural, is what is good. I think it is unnatural to, let's say, to push little children into the middle of the road because it's funny, because you laugh at the parents' agony. I do, on the other hand, think it's natural that if you see a child crying in the park, you don't pass that child by. You say, "Where's your mummy?" That's natural. So as far as I'm concerned, doing what is right is doing what is natural. So in many respects, I mean, of course, we differ. I mean, Pope Paul, what was the sixth, said contraception is a bad thing. Why? Because it said it's unnatural, because it leads to disharmonious relationships. And if others say, no, contraception is natural, because what does it do? It leads to harmonious relationships. That, you can have a relationship with a wife without worrying that she's just going to be a breeding cow or something. But anyhow, so I recognize that people can differ. But so often I think differences are not about the basic morality. They're a bit about the basic thing of what is, even abortion. Is a fetus a human being or not? I want to say it's not. Catholics, since the assumption, the Immaculate Conception, have wanted to say, oh, yes, she is. So, oh, yes, they are. So, I mean, I can see differences. So I think what is natural is what is good, is what is natural. So in that respect, I'm very, very orthodox, if you like. On the other hand, you ask me, what are the ultimate justifications? If I say, I don't think there are any. That it's, I think it's all a matter of psychology. I'm being a very standard Humean. I'm almost being a Kantian in this respect, because Kant did not want objective realities out there. I mean, Kant wanted to, he said it's a necessary condition of being a rational being. But, Kant did not want Platonic forms or God's will. I mean, apart from anything else, he was a pietist. So he was not going to bring God into his philosophical discussions. I mean, pietists are like Kierkegaard and Karl Barth, they don't. So, as I say, I don't look upon my position as in any sense irreligious, because I think if you're a religious person, you can just take my position, as I think Kierkegaard would, and say, okay, I put it in a religious context. I think at some level God is behind all of this. I've got I've got absolutely no argument with that. I mean, we're so much on the same side. So, I'm not one who thinks that rape and pillage is okay.
Paul, anything there you want to respond to?
A couple of things, and I appreciate Michael's very gracious and amiable manner. He makes, even if you think you're going into a debate with Michael Ruse, he just immediately creates such a disarming atmosphere that you just feel like you're drawn into a wonderful, warm conversation.
Well, Paul, remember that serpent in the Garden of Eden? Be very, very careful. I might be offering you an apple next. Go on.
But and so again, I appreciate the tone with which we can address these issues, and also Michael's recognition, and I certainly would concur, that there are many things that are beyond our ken, things that are mysterious to us, and of course, the book of Deuteronomy talks about the secret things that belong to the Lord, and there is, of course, there are things for us to find out too. That we're not left in complete ignorance, but we have capacities and faculties to explore the world in which we find ourselves. I would say when it comes to, Michael raised the matter of, how does, a physical matter give rise to consciousness and mental activity and so forth. Well, I'd say we have a backdrop to at least begin to make sense of that. If there is a non-physical spirit being or mind that brought a universe into existence a finite time ago, we do have a model or an analogy of how the mental or the spiritual can interact with the physical. And so, if we have been made in the image of God, it's not a far cry to say that these are compatible. That there is that the mental and the physical can engage. Again, how that's done, like Alvin Plantinga, the philosopher, said, how do I get from a thought about mowing the lawn to actually mowing the lawn? He said, I don't know how to explain all of that, but at least there is a metaphysical context to make sense of that possible interaction. When it comes to issues of morality, Michael talks about what we say is the epistemological dimension, which I appreciate and certainly would agree that we can get a lot of things right as we look at the world, as we perhaps envision ourselves in someone else's shoes. How would I like it if somebody else did that to me, et cetera? Kind of like the amplification of the golden rule of doing to others as you would have them do to you, et cetera. But I would want to push beyond that a little bit to the more metaphysical considerations, because we care for that crying child in the playground. We pay attention to kids who are about to cross the street when there's a busy when there's a lot of traffic, and so we show concern for that child. And I would say it's not simply something that we do because it's, quote, merely because it's natural. I mean, there's something to that. We've been wired in a certain way. But behind that is a presumption of the dignity of that child. There is a value and worth that this child is not some mere physical object, but has a dignity that transcends that physicality. And again, I would say that these sorts of things serve as pointers, in my estimation, of a God who exists, who has made human beings with dignity and worth. That it's not merely a matter of knowing right, how to make right decisions and avoid wrong ones and so forth, but beneath that is the question of where does that dignity come from in the first place? That actually is the assumption from which I will make a lot of my decisions. What grounds that assumption? Again, the existence of God who makes human beings with that dignity and worth, I think serves as a marvelous foundation that has a lot of explanatory power behind it.
Can I be really unfair to you now? Let's talk about the Holocaust. Let's talk about Heinrich Himmler, who was the author of The Final Solution, at that meeting that they all met, and then, what was it, whatever it was, and The Final Solution. Now, if God exists, clearly what Himmler did, according to your world picture, and I'm not going to challenge your argument within the world picture, what Himmler did was truly and totally evil. Mm-hmm. Now, if God does not exist, can you deny Himmler saying, oh, well, I'm a German, I believe in the master race, I believe that Jews are second rate, bringing us down, it's better, they're vermin, let's get rid of, we get rid of rats, we get rid of Jews. Now, I want to say something like that is inherently non-natural. It goes against what we as human beings are. And I want to say this is totally, totally immoral. Now, Paul, I'm trying to put you on the spot because I don't think,
feel free.
Obviously, I don't think you'd say the Holocaust is okay. But I want to know how you could criticize the Holocaust if God does not exist. Is it only because if God does not exist, if you've made a whacking big mistake about this, is it the case that Himmler gets off the hook?
The very question that you're asking presupposes that very dignity that I was just talking about, that what Himmler did was vile and immoral. And the backdrop there is that these Jews, human have dignity and worth, and what was done to them was an utter violation and degradation. And so I would say that even the question itself, if you're kind of bracketing God and saying if God didn't exist, well, the very fact that these human beings have dignity and worth is already an argument, or is already an assumption that begs for God. And so if you get rid of God and just continue to assume that human beings have value, I think that that's a problematic question. The way that the question is framed is kind of an unfair one, because that dignity and worth that are grounded in God, if you get rid of God, well, for one thing, you don't have anything that exists at all. If there is no God, there is no contingent existence. There are no human beings, let alone Earth and so forth. So there's a more fundamental question that needs to be asked. So one, I'd want to know why human beings have dignity and worth in the absence of God. How valueless processes, physical processes, deterministic processes, somehow conspire to create valuable human beings who are morally responsible. A second question that comes to mind would be this: if evil, and you talked about use the term non-natural, if evil is a non-natural event, phenomenon, etc. Well, evil itself is a departure from the way that you configured it or understood it or defined it. Evil is a departure from the way things ought to be. Now, if nature is all the reality that there is no way things ought to be. Things simply just are the way that they are. And so there's no oughtness that arises in this whole process. So even in the assumption that human beings have dignity and worth, and secondly, in the notion that evil exists, and evil is to be understood as a departure from the way things ought to be, that things ought not to be that way. Those things actually point us in the direction of a kind of standard or blueprint by which we judge something to be a departure. And so, do I have an answer to the Holocaust? No, but what I think I do have is a more plausible framework to make sense of these kinds of categories than if God does not exist and we are left with, well, how do we account for human dignity at all? I mean, I'd say nothing would exist anyway. But again, how value could emerge from valueless processes and how there could be a normative standard by which we can judge something to be a departure from the way things ought to be. So those are a few things that I would say theism or a biblical understanding of things makes better sense. And I could also add other features to that too, the fact that that God actually steps into this world in the person of Jesus Christ, that God has not left us all alone, and that God is he steps in, God suffers himself in the person of Jesus Christ, that he faces agony, anguish, injustice, the cruelty of death, dying naked on a cross, the picture of barbarism in ancient Roman times. And also, there is if there is a God who exists, then people like Himmler and Hitler, it's not the end of the story, that there will be cosmic justice that is done. And so there's a broader framework that gives to us, I think, better resources with which we can think through the problem of evil. And again, of course, every worldview, not just the biblical worldview, has to grapple with the problem of evil. So it's not just a Christian's burden, but everyone has to come to terms with, how do I make sense of evil in, given the kind of worldview that I hold? And I would simply say, that I don't have all the, say no Christian has all of the answers to the, to the problem or the problems of evil. But I'd say that the Christian is better positioned than someone take an alternative worldview to begin to address and to have at least a framework by which these things could be more plausibly understood than the alternatives. So that's what I'm saying.
My problem is, okay. My problem is, I don't know whether I want to go after you philosophically or theologically, but let me just mention the philosophical thing. It seems to me you're basically saying, if there is no God, then all things are possible. And I want to say, no.
I don't say that.
Well, it sounds to me like
nothing would exist.
Well, well, you see, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean,
it is.
you want to take the whole discussion out of the realm of argumentation if God does not exist. And I say, what if God does not exist? Then you're going to say, well, there's no argument about it. The only way we can do this. Anyhow, Paul, I want to go after the other side. Substitutionary atonement strikes me as the most repellent piece of theological doctrine that I've ever known. I mean, I bow to nobody before my respect to St. Augustine. I think he is, I'm bigger on St. Augustine than I am on Aquinas. But, substitutionary atonement is appalling. The idea that somebody would suffer in agony on the cross for my sins. I mean, I'm with, Irenaeus of Lyon, and as we all know, the Eastern Orthodox Church, and of course, Quakers. I want to say the death on the cross is an example of perfect love. It's something we should emulate. It's not excusing us. It's not wiping away anything. I mean, sacrifice on the cross is just awful. How about that one, Paul?
Well, I mean, you're right to point out the awfulness, because that's indeed what it was. And of course, if Jesus was a mere man, then sure that there would be no proper appropriation of this doctrine of sacrifice for the sins of the world. But if Jesus is God incarnate, that changes the picture. And of course, it's not a matter of, and perhaps you were not intending to cast it this way, but it sounds like, some people portray it a picture of divine or cosmic child abuse. But Jesus himself laid down his life voluntarily for our sakes, and that this is and we do have images and pictures of someone who is innocent paying the penalty for the guilty and legally clearing them of that guilt if they're willing to accept it. So, for example, you probably had your own share of teenage driving episodes, and of course, your insurance, for which you paid, was going to come to the assistance of the teenage driver who perhaps rear-ended someone, someone's car, and here you are, the innocent, guiltless parent, having done nothing wrong, but that child is on your insurance account, and so you have a legal responsibility to make sure that that's paid for, even though you are not in the wrong, but your child is. Now, we do have those sorts of analogies where there is where someone else has to step in to take care of the debt that someone else owes. So it's more than just a picture of love. I mean, it's very nice that you love your kids and pay for their insurance, but there's also a sacrifice, kind of that you are stepping in on their behalf to do what they themselves could not do. And so forth. So there are analogies that we could perhaps draw upon to illustrate that, but I don't know if that was the target of your
Well, I have to say,
argument. Maybe you just find it totally barbaric in the first place. Of course, that's a subjective kind of argument. That's not. I'm trying to explain kind of the logic of the atonement, but you're saying, oh, it's all barbaric, and so forget it and dismissing it accordingly. But I think that there's more to it than that.
Well, I must say, the first time I ever heard the Geico insurance company likened to Jesus Christ, boy, that is analogy beyond my ken. No, come on, Paul. I mean, yeah, it's a commercial deal. It doesn't get the kid off the hook. The kid is still guilty. There may be ways that he could do it, but the kid is still responsible. It is still his fault, and he should pay the penalty, even if he gets off the hook and doesn't have to go to jail, doesn't get fined. By God, if his dad doesn't give him a dressing down, if he doesn't himself say, yes, I am guilty, I bear the responsibility. Yes, Dad, I'm so glad you paid it. I'm covered. I really appreciate it. But it was my fault. It was my fault, and I'm at fault. I mean,
absolutely.
And you just don't wipe it off.
The analogy doesn't negate the personal responsibility and the need to apologize. And in fact, I think that's what, in other circumstances, like even the act of forgiveness itself, there's no waiting period, so to speak, till you say, oh, finally, this person deserves forgiveness. No, it is an act graciously given. And it is appropriate when it is appropriately received, when a person acknowledges the wrongdoing. that this is, that this gracious act is received so that there is a completion of that offer of forgiveness, that it's not merely just hanging there, but it is actually brought to completion by someone acknowledging personal responsibility. And so without that acknowledgement of personal responsibility, what the scriptures call repentance, then that forgiveness does not, forgiveness does not come off, it's not completed. But I know we're speaking, you say I'm going off on a theological tangent, although I do think that the theological dimension does have a lot of explanatory
power. That's why we're here. Paul,
yeah.
but let me talk about what I think, at least in recent years, is the most incredible act of self-sacrifice. Sophie Scholl of the White Rose Group, a young girl in 1943, hands out pamphlets in Munich saying this war is evil. She is caught, she is condemned to death, and she goes to the guillotine. And she says on her way, it's a bright, beautiful day, but I would rather be here than other places. Now, I don't know about you, Paul, but I read that, tears come to my eyes.
That's very moving.
And
Absolutely.
many, many times I have said, I am not worthy to lick her boots, but
Exactly.
she has left me an example that I will fail to live up to, but by God, I'm going to try to. And, for me, that is Jesus. That is completely and utterly Jesus. He did not have to die on the cross, but he went there as an example. He was scared shitless. He admitted that. But he did it because he knew that he had to do it. Paul, that for me is the meaning. I mean, my God, how can you call me an atheist? But that for me is the meaning of the sacrifice on the cross.
Yeah,
I hope you notice, Scott and Jody,
Yes,
that, don't call me an atheist ever again.
Okay.
I think
not do
if
that.
I could just jump,
Okay.
I know we're almost out of time, but let me just, and again, not to get the final word in, so to speak, because Michael, I really appreciate your presentation, and as Sophie Scholl is an amazing example, and the book is powerful, the movie is amazing and very gripping, and so that kind of sacrifice and dedication is powerful. And I would say too that with regard to Jesus, I mean, that also is a moving picture of love and self-sacrifice, no question about it. And we don't want to diminish that reality at all. But I'd say that there's a lot more going on to it than that. And so Jesus came for that, for that very purpose, to be a ransom for many. And so I think that that more could be said, but I think we are now out of time.
Well,
Actually,
but I appreciate the comments that you have made, Michael, and the wonderful warm engagement we've had.
Thanks, Paul. Actually, we usually take
brother,
this meeting for an hour and a half, but if we have a presenter, we ask them to present for an hour, and then we have Q&A for a half an hour. So we can go another hour if you're willing. And I want to point out something at this point. I think Michael has made a wonderful point that we, as many of us Christians, to make. People fall in love with their doctrines, substitutionary atonement or justification by faith, whatever it is. And they argue and they quibble about these things, and they seem to think that this is the meaning of Christianity, getting your dogmatic theology correct, when it's really all about Jesus and what Jesus did. And I find Michael Ruse making that point here on our show, which is a wonderful thing to see. So yes, I will never call you an atheist again.
okay.
But I did want to ask a question. Go ahead, Jody.
Yeah, Michael, I didn't know exactly what you were, so we will always call you an agnostic, and we appreciate the clarification. Go ahead, Scott.
Right. And Michael, I wanted to get back something that we were discussing earlier, and that is the source of morality. And you said, you gave us a very brief definition that what is good is what is natural. And you seem to be saying about what is natural for humankind, because when you were talking about the Holocaust and how it was evil to eliminate these people, the Jews and others, you said it goes against what we humans are. I made note of that. What we are, that sounds like essentialism. You're saying that mankind has an essence, and there is something that because we know about that essence, we can know what's good for it and what's evil for it. But when I was reading your book On Purpose, I got more of the feeling that you were closer to the existentialist viewpoint as you were quoting Sartre and others like that. So how do you respond to that idea?
Well, I'm not going to get caught on, philosophers arguing about essence and that sort of thing, because obviously there is a human nature. Obviously, I mean, I look at you and I don't say, oh my God, I look at Jody and I say, oh my God, you're a boy. But I don't look at you and say, oh my God, you're a warthog. Now, why don't I say, oh my God, you're a warthog? Because you're human. You've got the aspects of being human. Now, we know, and it's not me, that paleoanthropologists will tell you until 10,000 years ago, we were on a 5 million year camping trip. We were small bands going, surviving out there. And the point is, you had to get on. That was the essence of being human. We're not that strong. We're not that fast. We're not that, and we have all the adaptations, speech, think of one thing. Women do not come into heat. Imagine you're in a hunter-gatherer band and a couple of the people come into heat. My God, down tools for a week. You can't do that. So I want to say that we are inherently social beings. And of course, then came agriculture, and that meant more babies and fixed things that we could, and war and hatred, and these things came up culturally. But so if you're going to talk about essences, I think that our essence, if you're going to talk about that, is to be social beings, which has been overlaid by culture. I mean, Germans are not inherently evil human beings. They're not. But of course, what happened was the Depression, the defeat of the First World War, the Depression, Hitler coming along. If I say I won't say like Trump, but like somebody who's offering them a solution, an easy solution. And it all went wrong. I'm not surprised at that, but it doesn't mean to say that we're not naturally good. I think that's why I want to say the Holocaust is a perversion of what it is to be a human being. I mean, it's as simple as that. I want to say Sophie Scholl, for me, is exemplary of what it means to be a human being. Anne Frank, she wasn't going out and doing what Sophie Scholl did, but she expressed such, belief in the worth of humans. I mean, I, bow down and I weep before these people. So yes, I think we are social beings. Even Jody.
Michael, if I might come back to a point that you had made earlier, you said that I was writing off the whole debate by saying, well, if God didn't exist, then what would exist? And so I'm changing the rules of the game. But if you think about it, well, one is, the universe is made up of contingent things. These are not eternal, necessary, etc. things. So nothing finite, physical had to exist. So there's nothing behind it all in terms of it being these eternal forms or something like that. That there is no. These contingent things did not simply come into existence on their own. So that leaves us with a question. Well, if we're talking about, well, let's just assume all the contingent things are just there. Mm-hmm. Well, the way that you're configuring the debate then is to say, let's just assume all of these things are given, in addition to human beings having value and moral responsibility and moral duties, and there being a standard by which we judge something to be horrifically evil. One, it's how do we account for anything at all? Secondly, where does that standard come from? How do we move from is to ought? So I don't think I'm changing the nature of the debate by saying, well, if there is no God, then everything would be, there would be nothing. Of course, God by definition would be a necessary being, would exist in every possible world. So, I'm kind of just bowing to your somewhat, theoretical question here. But I'd say if everything does depend upon the existence of this necessary being, then just to assume that all of these things could come to existence, are existing on their own, that's granting a lot. I'd want to go back and explore the basis for just taking that for granted as a brute fact.
But the point is, Paul, you're throwing up even more problems. My position is, I don't know. Maybe
Right.
it just is. I'm not saying that I believe that. Maybe there is something. But the trouble is, you throw up a necessary being, and then you've got all the issues about what it means to be necessary existence. I mean, Hume pointed this out. What does it mean to be a necessary existent? How can a necessary existent have any connection with the rest of us? 2 + 2 = 4 is necessary, but quite frankly, Paul, 2 + 2 = 4 doesn't help you when you're doing your income tax. I mean, it doesn't care.
Sure,
It can't have anything to do with that.
Sure,
When you're faced with an incalcitrant teenager, when you've got a teenager who is being really difficult, I mean, 2 + 2 = 4 is not a great help.
Well, I'd say that a static fact or truth like 2 + 2 = 4 is a lot different from a necessary personal being that does ground our human dignity and that actually may give to us some insight on how to handle some of those relational, social sorts of concerns. So anyway, so we're talking about a personal being, necessary being, versus abstract, formal, mathematical truths. Big difference there.
Well, you see, the thing is, Paul, I think you're raising something with at least as much problems as without it. All I want to say is, why don't you just stay with me? I don't know why it all works, why there's something rather than nothing. But I do know that being a natural human being is what we mean by being good. And what we mean by being good is being a natural human being. There is certainly no physical. I mean, evolution doesn't prove. I mean, I differ from Ed Wilson, my good friend Ed. Evolution does not prove morality. It doesn't. I'm what they call an evolutionary debunker. I mean, I'm a moral non-realist, but it doesn't mean to say I rule out then some belief beyond that. I mean, I don't know. But what I want to say to you is, why can't you, as it were, say, yes, that's true, but morality is as it is, and that's how it works. And that's why I can say Sophie Scholl was an exemplar of a wonderfully moral human being, and Heinrich Himmler was not.
Well, what I'm trying to do is, even apart from this, what I've added to the discussion, I've tried to take your observations about morality, about evil, about human dignity, and say, I think here is a plausible context to ground these things, to make sense of them. So rather than saying, oh, these, I'm just left ignorant without any further possibility of inference, I'd say, well, a theistic framework actually makes sense, of human dignity. Check. A standard by which we judge something to be evil. Check. Moral duties. Check. Those things fit squarely, and a lot of atheists themselves recognize that if there is no good personal God, then
all things are permitted.
It's hard to make sense of human dignity, hard to make sense of evil, hard to make sense of morality. So I'm actually, it's not just someone who's trying to preach to the choir here, but I think I'm also drawing on the the observations of people, like J.L. Mackie and Nietzsche and Sartre and so forth, who recognize that to remove God from the picture is to remove the grounding for a lot of things. That
yes, but
makes sense
the
to our
whole point,
humanity.
you mentioned Sartre. Yes, it is, but it doesn't mean to say Sartre gives up on morality or anything like that. He says we are condemned to freedom. We must make these choices ourselves. We must stand up to the cosmos and say, this is what I am going to do. Personally, I think somebody who does that is a far higher, more moral person than somebody who says, oh, well, God told me to do it and I'm going to do it, because if I don't, I'm not going to go to heaven, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I know, what is it, whatever heresy it is. But, Paul, you're doing it because you want to get on the right side of God. I'm doing it because I'm made in the image of God. I'm doing it because I was given by God that freedom, but also that responsibility to make these choices on my own and to say, I am going to be against Hitler because I, Michael Ruse, say that this is wrong. I'm not against Hitler because God told me it was wrong. I mean, I hate to sound pretentious. I don't, of course. I'm such an awful human being. But, Paul, I want to say I'm not only morally better than you, I'm spiritually better than you.
The way that you've
Oh,
construed
I'm
it.
sorry. Scott has cut me off. That's the end of this discussion. Go on.
I'd say if that's how you have construed it, well, I'd say we're dealing with a caricature here. I'd say that we are, if we have been made with dignity and worth, we have a fundamental basis for recognizing that certain things are wrong, and that we can both agree, and I think it's very clear that the sorts of things that Hitler and Himmler did were wrong, and we can recognize that if we have a halfway decently functioning conscience. So we don't have to. A person doesn't have to believe in God or hear some voice from God, so to speak, to recognize certain things as right or wrong. I think we can, C.S. Lewis talked about this in his Abolition of Man, where at the end of the book, he lists all these moral codes from various civilizations and time periods. And they have a lot of the same sorts of moral truths and principles that we all would recognize, whether we believe in God or not. So I'm not, but I'm saying how do we, if we are valuable human beings, intrinsically valuable, I'd say, well, that value actually makes sense if there is a source of value. That is something that there's a metaphysical connection there. We human beings are conscious. Well, there is a supremely self-aware being that grounds or explains the existence of consciousness in this world. Moral responsibility. There's a free being that made the universe, and we can talk about having our own sense of free will and personal responsibility as being grounded in something beyond ourselves. So I'm thinking in terms of what explains these things that we take for granted, rather than saying, oh, these things exist. I think that a theistic framework actually helps us to make those connections, that these connections actually seem more natural given theism than, say, a naturalistic point of view would.
Yes, but I can't help feeling that this is, something that makes it feel more natural or something like that. I can't help feeling at some level, I say more, almost spiritually, my position is, I say, I am condemned to freedom. It doesn't mean to say I'm denying God. It means that I have been put on this earth as a human being. I have been given these talents and these abilities, and it is my moral responsibility to make use of them as best I can. No Nobody, I mean, that's the great thing about being a human being, is you're not doing it because God told you. You're doing it because it comes out of you as a human being. By the way, a footnote, I grew up on C.S. Lewis, the screw tape letters. These days, I cannot understand the veneration that you people have for C.S. Lewis, but that's a footnote. Okay. But anyhow, as I go back to this, as I say,
Footnote acknowledged.
anyhow, come on, Scott. I thought we were going to have some other questions.
All right, Michael, by the way, you're very low in the video frame. I don't know if your laptop is flipping. We want to see you
I'm
clearly.
a non-believer. You know that I'm going to be low.
He doesn't want us to see that he's
down to the
refilling all
underworld.
of his wine glasses perpetually while
frankly,
we've been talking throughout this evening.
I'm rather hoping that Jody's going to be low, but there we are.
Okay, so I want to ask you about something you said, Michael. You've defined the natural as the good, and what is natural for man, or what is his essence, is to be social according to his culture. You said something like that. So it seems to me that with that ideal, we're on the road to moral relativism, because we could construe that the Nazis were being social within their culture in deciding among themselves. We've decided as a culture that the Jews are vermin, they're causing all our troubles. Therefore, if we eliminate them, we make our society better. And I even see it in your statement. You said something like, I want to say, I don't approve of Hitler. It's person relative, moral relativity. How do you avoid that?
Because I didn't say that. What I said is we are social despite our culture. Despite our culture.
I might have misheard.
I believe that we are, if you're going to talk about essences, I believe that we stand upright, we are bipedal, and we have to go to the loo every day. I mean, that's what being a human being is all about. And I want to say an inherent part of that is being a social being. I mean, look at you, Scott. What a wimp you are. Open your mouth. Let me see the fangs you've got. Hold your hands up. Let me see the claws that you've got. That's it. I mean, really and truly, Scott, you are a wimp beyond all comparison, particularly when you meet the average, predator out there. So why did your ancestors do so well? Because they worked together. They worked together. When they were facing a real threat, they didn't all dash off. They didn't abandon each other. They said, okay, we're all in this. How do we deal with this? And I want to say that the essence of being a human being is being a social being. I mean, Scott, this was 5 billion years of evolution. 5 billion. And then in the last 10,000 years, and if you don't believe me, go and ask the paleoanthropologists. Agriculture came on the scene, and that led to all these distortions. It really is a blip at the end of time. So I want to say, yeah, these things are happening. I do not think that Heinrich Himmler was natural or doing. I mean, I think we can explain these things. I think, for instance, that evolving meant in-group, out-group. We had to look after our group, and we had to, as it were, stay apart from other groups. And if you look at the whole explanation of the Germans against Jews, the Germans were the best treaters of Jews at the end of the 19th century of anybody. The Germans were the people who allowed Jews to become doctors and lawyers and these. So what went wrong? Because Hitler said, we are suffering. We have to look for those who are at fault, Jews. And all the way through. I mean, Hitler, for instance, was very friendly, very complimentary about Asians. So he wasn't against ethnics. Hitler thought highly of the Japanese, but Jews were there. It was in-group, out-group. So as I say, I can see we had these adaptations which were distorted by culture. So I'm a lot more bullish about you and me than I think Paul is. I mean, I don't think we need God to do this. I think God has not altogether helped. But I mean, who are the people supporting Himmler? I mean, those German Lutherans, for God's sakes. I mean, really. So, as I say, I mean, I'm not against God. I mean, I'm a Quaker, or I was a Quaker. I mean, my God is not that kind of God. So I'm not against that. But I want to
And
say,
God didn't agree with those Lutherans either.
yeah. But I want to say, I think if we're made in the image of God, that means God has to make these decisions. And nobody's going to help him or tell him or whatever. God has to make these decisions. And when he makes them, it's his responsibility. Being made in the image of God means we have to make these decisions. And nobody is going to help us, or in the sense, and nobody is going to stop us. But that is what we're going to do. And there's no excuses for Himmler. Yeah. But there's every reason to praise Sophie Scholl.
Well, I think we're making good progress here. You just said there could be a God, just not the God that we believe in. So.
I've said that all along. I'm an agnostic, not an atheist.
Right.
Well,
Even Sartre, he lamented the fact that there is no God from which we could derive any sort of moral truths, that we're pretty much left on our own. He is a pity that God didn't exist in his existentialism as a humanism.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I disagree.
The great
with
resource
Sartre.
God could have been to buttress a moral framework.
Yeah, but I want to say, Paul, an interesting point, and I've actually changed my mind on this. I want to say that Sartre says we have total freedom. I think we are part of an evolved community. And so we are not born with a blank slate. We are born with beliefs and behaviors and that sort of thing. And so I mean, I think we can reject it, but I don't think morality is just something, you and I sit down and say, oh, what should we make moral today? How about marking library books with yellow markers? Good idea. Let's do it. I mean, no, I don't think it works that way. But so I think we're part of an evolving community, and I think Sartre missed this. So, but as I missed it. My God, Michael Ruse missed this. But that's what I want to say. Anyhow, there you go.
Michael, if I could just ask you, in light of previous statements you've made about morality being a corporate illusion fobbed off on our genes to get us to cooperate, how would you say your view has changed since you wrote that? Has it changed much, or would you say?
Well, of course, it was an inflammatory statement, as we all know. What we philosophers call persuasive definitions. I do not think morality at what we philosophers call the substantive level. Should I kick little old ladies into the middle of the road on Fridays? I don't think morality is an illusion at that level. I think morality at the level at which you want to take it is an illusion, or rather, I want to say the foundations that you believe there are illusory. That's so what we call in the trade meta-ethics. The two levels: substantive or normative ethics. What should I do? Meta-ethics. Why should I do what I should do? I don't think morality is an illusion at the bottom level. I do think any claims that morality has an objective basis, whether it's Platonic forms or whether it's the end point of evolution, which is what Ed Wilson believes, or whether it's, God, which is what you believe, I think that's illusory.
I have a question from an audience member.
Oh, yeah.
I happen to know this fellow, Bob. He's a Christian and a friend of ours. He says this: is the God that Mr. Ruse alludes to one of his own making, or is the God he refers to the one true God?
Oh, come on, fella. Come on. By the way, I don't like to be called Mr. Ruse. You must give me a title, Professor Ruse. But I'm an ex-Quaker. Quakers do not believe in titles or anything like that. So I'm Michael Ruse. Anyhow, no, I mean, what am I supposed to say? I'm not making. I understand what the Christian God is about. I know the Augustinian version. I know the Iranian, Irenaeus, version. I know these things. So But I want to say, I just don't believe in them. I'm not denying any kind of world spirit. I'm very uncomfortable about saying that Jesus was the Son of God. But then again, if Jesus was the Son of God, what about Muhammad? Does this mean Muhammad was not the true prophet of God? I mean, are the Jews at some level condemned to eternal punishment because they did not accept Jesus? I mean, yeah, I don't want to get there. I mean, I just don't want to get there. But so, I mean, I don't mean that I think that Jesus was a great inspiration. I think he was a great teacher. But whether he was God, I'm not a Unitarian, but I'm with the Unitarians on this. But so as I say, but is there a God? I don't know. As I say, I'm not denying there may be some kind of world force, whether it's a conscious world force or whatever, that might exist. But as I say, the world is not any queerer than I think it is. It's queerer than I could think it is.
Michael, once again, you're slipping down in the frame.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He's slipping himself another
What you want to
wine.
look at is the whole Michael Ruse. Okay. Go on.
Okay.
Okay, Scott, I seem to
Yes, sir.
shut you up now.
No, I'm just leaving space for people to ask questions. I want to bring you back to something you said with Sartre. He says we have this freedom and we must, and that it's an authentic life is to stand up to the universe and say, I'm going to act and be authentic. It seems to me that people that you and I would consider evil, who have done evil things, the serial killer, the mass murderer, they could fit this bill. They've used their freedom to stand up to the universe and say, I will be a predator. There are predators out there. So once again, I feel like you're not giving us a good ground for morality and ethics.
Well, no, okay, Scott, let's talk about the people who do that sort of thing. Okay, let's talk about, the serial killers. Jeffrey Dahmer, who not only had sex with his victims, homosexual sex, but he preferred that he did it when they were dead, and he then cut them up and eat them. I don't think he's natural, but I look at him, I see all sorts of reasons why this guy, I'm not denying that there are people who don't fit, who don't work out. I mean, just like there are people, I want to say we're bipedal, but and I do, that there are people for various reasons cannot walk, they're paralyzed. It doesn't mean to say being bipedal is not, if you want to use the word essence, is not part of being a human being. So I want to say being social is what it is to be a human being. It does not in any sense deny that people for various reasons might be perverted or twisted out of that. But it doesn't mean to say there isn't a basic plan. I mean, and of course, the whole point about being an educator is I am trying to teach young people to release their basic nature, to teach them to be human beings. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I think it's time to start wrapping things up. And this has been a great discussion. We do appreciate the civil tone and the back and forth. We are a ministry here. We believe in evangelism, but we don't believe in hostile evangelism. We believe in going to people with different opinions and asking them questions and having a conversation. And that's what we've been doing tonight. So I think this video will stand as a good example of how to have a disagreement on matters theological and scientific and philosophical, and still get along at the end. So Jody, what do you have to say at this point?
Well, I guess we could, I'm just not following Michael Ruse's. I'm just thinking that if there is no God, he's not saying there is no God, but if there is no God, I don't understand why it would be wrong to murder. But I think according to the Bible, God plants morality upon our hearts, and so that even Michael Ruse knows what morality is. So God plants morality on everybody's heart, whether they know the Bible or not. And I know Paul Copan actually wrote a book, Is God a Moral Monster? And that's a big thing that, agnostics or atheists attack Christians with. I would like to hear his, a brief response on his book. And I really do appreciate him writing that book.
So here it is, 8:29, and we've got to wrap up in 1 minute. I'd say just read the book and hope you'll ponder it and that it will bring illumination.
All right.
I want to say.
Want y'all to
I want to say.
All right, go ahead.
Knowing Paul Copan, I got a feeling another book is in the bake. Just a prediction. Just a prediction.
How'd you know? Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, got a few things going.
Paul, you know perfectly well you cannot resist or walk away from the temptation of stamping all over me in public in print. Come on, Paul.
Stamping all over you.
All right. All right. Well, it's been really, really fun. I mean, Michael Ruse.
I don't think I stamp all over you.
Our
I disagree with you, but I think you're a wonderful conversation partner, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you, especially through this project of the Three Views.
Don't forget,
so
Paul.
It's been a pleasure.
Don't forget, Paul. You're a C and I'm an R. So C comes before R when you've got a joint publication.
That's not fair. My last name starts with a W, always at the end.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Usually it's a matter of, well, I won't get into that.
I'm ahead of all of you.
That's right. There's a B.
There you go.
Well,
but please subscribe to our channel. Please like it. Please share it with your agnostic, atheist, and Christian friends. And we do appreciate y'all joining us. I'll give the last word to Scott.
I want to thank our guests so much for coming out, Paul and Michael, for sharing your time and having a winsome conversation, and just being great guests. And we want to say thank you all for watching. Hope to see you next week, and God bless you all. Good night.
All right. Good night.
Good night, folks.